Hello guys, this is the second video of Laxmikant polity historical background. So today we are going to discuss about the Charter Act of 1833. Three things you need to remember in this act. First one, the Governor General of Bengal was not called to be the Governor General of India. And the first such Governor General was William Bentinck. The second thing is that the Governor of Bengal was given the exclusive legislative power for the entire British India. And he is known to be the Governor General of India. And the third thing is that it ended the activities of East India Company as a commercial bodies. And now the East India Company was purely administrative body. Coming to Charter Act of 1853. It separated the legislative and executive function of the Governor General Council. Second thing is that it led to establishment of Indian Central Legislative Council. Third thing, it introduced open competition system for the selection and recruitment of civil servant for the now even Indian can be the part of the examination. Third thing, it extended the company rule and allowed to retain the possession of Indian territories in the trust of British Crown. But it did not specify a particular time period for the company rule. Fourth thing, it introduced for the first time the local representation in Indian Central Legislative Council. Of the 6 new legislative members of the Governor General Council, 4 members were now to be appointed by the local provincial government of Madras, Bombay, Bengal and Agra. Now coming to the Government of India Act 1858. The act was for the good government of India. Due to the discontent among the people, now the government is for the appeasement of the people. So the first thing this act did was it changed the designation of Governor General of India to that of the Viceroy of India. Lord Canning was the first Viceroy. It ended the system of double government. Remember guys, the double government was established by the British India Act, and the double government was due to the Board of Control, who was managing the political affairs of the company, and Court of Directors, who was managing the commercial affairs of the company. Third thing, it created a new office of Secretary of State for India, and Secretary of State was to be guided by, assisted by 15-member Council of India, which should act as an advisory body to it. Fifth thing, it constituted the Secretary of State in Council as a body corporate capable of suing and being sued in England and India. Now coming to the Indian Council Act of 1861. This act made the beginning of the representative institution by associating Indian. First time the Indians were associated in the lawmaking. And Viceroy should nominate some Indians as non-official member of the expanded council. Hence, there would be 3 nominated Indians in the Legislative Council: Raja of Banaras, Maharaja of Patiala, Sardinkar Rao. The second thing is, up to now we were having centralized administration, but is this act for the first time initiated the process of decentralization by restoring the legislative power to the Bombay and Madras presidency, which was taken away by the Charter Act of 1833. Third thing, it also provided for the establishment of new legislative council for Bengal, Northwestern Frontier Province and Punjab. Fourth thing, it recognized the portfolio system, and also it empowered the Viceroy to issue the ordinance during emergency. Now coming to the features of the Act of 1892. First thing that it did was it increased the number of additional non-official members in the central and provincial legislative council, but maintained the official majority in them. Second thing, it increased the function of the Legislative Council and gave the power of discussion of budget, addressing the questions. Now, for the first time also, the process of nomination of some of the non-official member of Central Legislative Council by the Viceroy on the recommendation of the Provincial Legislative Councils and the Bengal Chamber of Commerce, and that Provincial Legislative Councils by the Governor on the recommendation of the District Board, municipalities, universities, trade associations, zamindars and chambers. This act made a limited and indirect provision for the use of election in the filling up of some of the non-official seats, both in the central and legislative councils. The word elections was, however, not used in this act. The process was described as the nomination made on recommendation of certain bodies. So remember guys, this last line, nomination made on recommendation of certain bodies. This was established by the Indian Council Act of which one? Can you remember guys? It was 1892. Act of 1892. Indian Council Act 1892. The features of the Act of 1909. This act was also known as Parliamentary Reform. First thing it did was increase the size of Legislative Council, both as central and provincial, from 16 to 60. Second thing, it retained the official majority in the Central Legislative Council but allowed the Provincial Legislative Council to have non-official majority. Remember guys this thing? This act of parliamentary reform for the first time allowed non-official majority in the provincial legislature. Third thing, it enlarged the deliberative function of the Legislative Council at both the levels. For example, members were allowed to ask the supplementary questions, move resolutions on the budget and so on. Fourth thing, it provided for the first time for the association of Indian with the Executive Council of the Viceroy and Government. Satyendra Prasad Sinha became the first Indian to join the Viceroy Executive Council, and he was appointed as a law minister. Last thing, it introduced the system of communal representation by the Muslim by accepting the concept of separate electorate. Under this, Muslim members were elected only by the Muslim voters. Thus, the act legalized the communalism, and the Lord Minto came to be known as the father of communal electorate. It also provided for the separate representation of presidency, corporations, chamber of commerce, and universities and jamindar. Now, the Act of 1919. It introduced the responsible government in India, also known as Montagu-Chelmsford Reform. First thing, it relaxed the central control over the provinces by demarcating the separating central and provincial subjects. It further divided the subjects into the two parts, transferred and reserved. Transferred subjects were to be administered by the governor with the aid of ministers responsible for the legislative councils, and the reserved subjects, on the other hand, were administered by the governor and his executive councils. This dual system was known as diarchy. Okay. Third thing, it introduced for the first time bicameralism and direct election. Remember guys, in the Act of 1892, the system of nomination was there, while direct election is coming for the first time in Act of 1919. It required that 3 of the 6 members of the Viceroy Executive Council other than Commander-in-Chief were to be Indian. Till now, we were having Indians allowed only in the Central Legislative Council. But now for the first time, Viceroy Executive Council also to have Indians. Fifth, it extended the principle of communal representation to Sikh, Indian, Christian, Anglo-Indian and European. Sixth point, it granted franchise to a limited number of people on the basis of property, tax or education. So remember guys, first time a franchisee was created of voters who will vote in the elections. 7th, it created a new office of High Commissioner for India in London and transferred to him some of the functions hitherto before the Secretary of State in India. 8. Establishment of Public Service Commission. Hence, Central Public Service Commission was set up in 1926 for recruiting civil servants. Now that the government work is so enlarged that it needs the help of civil servants, and every time civil servant recruitment to come from the Europe was also heavy on the pocket of British. So the first time they started the Public Service Commission and recruitment of civil servant here only. It separated for the first time the provincial budget and the central budget and authorized the provincial legislature to enact their budget. This was a major step toward decentralization. It empowered the provincial legislature to enact their own budget. 10th, it provided for the appointment of statutory commission to inquire into and report on the working after 10 years of its coming into force. This is also the first time that it appointed a statutory commission for appointment for looking after the working of commissions. So Simon Commission was appointed like that. It came in 1927 to look into the matter of working of this government. It recommended the abolition of diarchy, extension of responsible government in the provinces, establishment of federation to the British India and princely state, continuation of the communal electorates, and so on. However, this was opposed by the Indians as it was having no Indian member in it, and the three round table conference of the representative of the British government, British India and the Indian princely state, on the basis of these decisions, a white paper on the constitutional reform was formed. Now, communal award. In 1932, MacDonald, the British Prime Minister, announced a scheme for the representation of minorities and came to be known as Communal Award. And according to it, it awarded not only continued separate electorate for the Muslim, Sikh, Indian Christian and Anglo-Indian and European, but also extended it to the depressed class, scheduled caste. Gandhiji took fast unto death in Yerwada jail in Pune to get the award modified, and at last he was able to influence depressed class leader like B.R. Ambedkar, and the act is known as Pune Pact, and which retained the Hindu joint electorate and gave reserve seat to the depressed class. Government of India Act 1935. This is the final major act which we need to learn from the point of view of prelims. This act was having the mandate to providing a complete responsible government in India. So the features of this act is, first, it established the All India Federation consisting of the provinces, princely state as a unit, also divided the powers between central and federalist for the center, provincialist for the provinces and concurrentalist for the both. Residuary power were given to the viceroy. However, the federation never came into being as princely state did not join it. Second, it abolished the diarchy in the province and provincial autonomy, and introduced provincial autonomy in the place. But at the same time, it adopted diarchy in the centers. Remember guys, diarchy is the system of government in which the subjects for the administration by the governor are to be divided into two parts. First part was called with the transfer subject, in which the governor with the aid of minister responsible for the legislature council have to work on it. Second thing was a reserve subject, in which the governor and the executive council without responsible to the legislative councils. Okay. So the fourth thing this act did, what it introduced bicameralism in 6 out of 11 provinces. Remember guys, the bicameralism was already introduced by the act of Government of India Act of 1919, but this act extended it to the other states. It further extended, so fifth point is, it further extended the principle of communal representation to the depressed class, working women and labor workers. Sixth, it abolished the Council of India, which was established by the Government of India Act 1858. Seventh, it extended the franchise. About 10% of the total population got the voting rights. 8. It provided for the establishment of Reserve Bank of India to control the currency and credit of the country. 9th, it provided for the establishment of not only a Federal Public Service Commission but also a Provincial Public Service Commission and Joint Public Service Commission for 2 or more provinces. And the last point is, it provided for the establishment of Federal Court, which was set up in 1937. So this was all, guys. In India's Independent Act of 1947 is not at all important from the point of view of prelims. In the note, you need to see 2 points. The Mughal Emperor Shah Alam granted Diwani to the company after his victory in the Battle of Buxar in 1764, and it was introduced by the British Parliament by the British Prime Minister William Pitt. Indian Independence Bill was introduced in the British Parliament on July 4, 1947 and received the royal assent. The act came into force in August 15, 1947. The boundaries between the two dominions were determined by the Boundary Commission headed by Radcliffe. Pakistan included the province of Western Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, East Bengal, Northwest Frontier Province, and the district of Sylhet in Assam. The referendum for the Northwestern Frontier Province and Sylhet were in favor of Pakistan.